Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by...
Do you wish you knew the saints better? Overwhelmed with all the events in Catholic history and just wish you could tie it all together? It's tough work, and even scientists have determined that it takes approximately 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless it is done with play, in which case it takes between 10 and 20 repetitions. Introducing Saint Cards, where the facts about saints and history are presented in fun and engaging games for ages 4 to 104. Check out Saint Cards at saintcards.com and begin the fun for your family, school, and parish today.
Introducing the redesigned CatholicSingles.com, featuring new ways that put the spotlight on the person and their faith, not just a profile picture. For the past 20 years, faithful Catholics have used CatholicSingles.com, and the reimagined CatholicSingles.com website is ready to help single Catholics take the next step in sharing meaningful relationships with other faithful Catholics. Remember, CatholicSingles.com for faith, fellowship, and love.
What are you doing this Lent? The St. Paul Center is streaming their newest video Bible study for free, starting Ash Wednesday. Based on Scott Hahn's renowned covenantal theology, this is a study no one should miss. Invite your friends, Catholic or not. Don't miss your chance to see this premium study for free. Go to stpaulcenter.com to sign up today.
Friends, and welcome to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends from Breadbox Media. So happy to be back behind the microphone today for what I'm sure is going to be just an absolutely delightful conversation. My guest today is a friend who is new to me, and she has just an amazing book for me to share with you. Our guest is Andrea Zachman, and Andrea is an award-winning writer and the faith formation coordinator at St. Michael Catholic Church in St. Michael, Minnesota. Before taking the position at our church, Andrea served at her community as a corrections officer and a search and rescue diver. She sounds awesome and interesting already. Andrea counts scuba diving and shooting competitions among her hobbies, and she converted to the Catholic faith in 2007, and she and her husband Nathan have 4 beautiful children. A passionate planner at heart, Andrea finds joy in teaching others about the faith, and her writing makes the sacred that surrounds us at Mass come to life for all ages. We are here today to discuss her beautiful new book, and our guest, welcome Andrea Zachman. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, listening audience.
Well, before we dive into this beautiful book, and the name of the book, I should say, out of the chutes, is The Sacred That Surrounds Us, how everything in a Catholic church points to heaven. Before we get into that, which I can't wait to discuss because it's so beautiful, Andrea, just tell us a little bit about your story. That's the way I always like to start my show. So tell us about Andrea's story.
Yeah, Lisa. So I'm a convert to the faith back in 2007. I became Catholic from not really practicing much of anything. I guess I would say at the most I was a Lutheran for a while. But I became Catholic out of convenience at that point. I wasn't against anything in the church, but everything was very relative to me. And so about 4 years into my faith, 4 years after converting, I finally started to ask myself, what is it that I actually believe? What is it that the church tells me that I should believe? And why does it matter that it's anything different than what I currently think about? And so I started asking those why questions, right? So even as a convert, I had to have that conversion. So I started asking myself, why? Why does the church do that? Why do we say that? Why do we believe a certain doctrine is correct and infallible? And so I started asking those questions, and here we are, 7 years later, and I had the opportunity to serve our beautiful Catholic faith in writing the Sacred that surrounds us, and it kind of has stemmed off since I took the position here at church 2 years ago after 15 years in law enforcement. And I really enjoy teaching others about the faith and helping them to ask those why questions, helping them to see that beauty that I had missed out on for at least 4 years of being Catholic, and, countless years before even being Catholic, that I never even saw the Catholic Church as something that was sacred. So I really had that conversion, and I'm really trying to learn as much as I can and see the beauty that I can and help my children, right? Because now I have 4 children, and I really want them to ask those questions and be able to defend their faith and be able to see the beauty that they have in their Catholic faith. So I'm just a mom that's trying to help her children.
Moms are amazing, so never say you're just a mom. But let me step back and ask you about something that you said, which is a conversion sort of convenience. I'm wondering if your conversion had anything to do with your spouse's faith or the faith of your children, or where that falls into the story.
So yeah, I believe it was about the time that I was pregnant with our first child, yes. And I remember being with my sister, and I was visiting her, and this was before that I really put my heart into the faith, and basically put my head into the faith too. At that point, I hadn't. And so she had asked me that question that I wasn't prepared for, and she is not a practicing Catholic. She is not, I don't even know that she would consider herself a Christian, but she asked that question, and she said, "Do you really believe that you eat his flesh and drink his blood?" And I actually said, "No, that's disgusting. No, why would you even think that?" And it was, I think, shortly after that moment that I began to say, I really need to look into what exactly I am professing to be a part of, right? Mm-hmm. So it was that awakening of, I need to know this. And then as I began to read and as I began to investigate, I found the early church, and they had a huge part in my conversion to really wrap my heart around what it is that the Catholic faith believes. Because not only does the Catholic Church in 2011 at that time say that we believe this, but the church 2,000 years ago said that we believe this. Mm-hmm. So the early church for me was huge. To find 2,000 years of history was absolutely amazing for me, coming from zero history, really.
So I also, I find your story so fascinating. And one of the things in your bio is this mention of law enforcement and being a search and rescue diver. Now, are you a lifelong Minnesotan, or are you new to Minnesota?
No, so I'm pretty much North Dakota, Minnesota.
Okay.
We moved a lot growing up, so...
I'm just wondering what kind of search and rescue diving happens in Minnesota. Is it like in a lake, or... I'm showing my California nature here, but...
Yeah, so the lakes here and the rivers, there's a lot that either gets dumped for searching for evidence, or if there's ever an accident with ice fishing and obviously regular fishing. So there's a lot of lakes, obviously, and the river that goes through. So that was the basis of where we did our training and did our assignments.
I think that perhaps as part of your training, you notice small details. And so I think perhaps that's part of what qualified you to write this beautiful book. The name of the book, again, is The Sacred That Surrounds Us. And if you have a chance to pick up this book, it's from Ascension Press and it's already a bestseller. So congratulations on that. It does such a beautiful job of, I'll let you describe it, but my perception as a reader and somebody that just picked it up is, so you take us into the physical church and you introduce us to all of the sacred items, the sacred vessels, the architecture of the church, the different things around us that surround us in the everyday nature of our churches. And you give us a glimpse into why those things not only are significant in our worship, but also significant in that they point us toward heaven. So where did the idea come from for the book?
Beautifully said, Lisa.
Well, thank you.
The inspiration for the book it came about 2 years ago. I was sitting down with my friend Julie, and she had a first communicant at that time, and I had just started working for the church. And so I had asked her, I want to get your son something for his first communion for the party, because I want to obviously get him something that will help to celebrate this occasion, this beautiful sacrament that he's entering into. And she looked at me and she said, what I really want him to get, I can't find it. And I said, well, what is it that you want for him? And she said, well, he keeps asking questions about everything that he sees at church. What is that? Or what is that for? Or why is that here? And there's lots of books about the Mass, about the order of the Mass, the prayers, the things that we say and the things that we do, but I can't find anything that allows me to answer his questions. And so I just said, let me see what I can do. And I started to write this, and I sat down with our two parish priests who were very patient with me and with their huge busy schedules, and I just began to ask them, what is this, and why is it here, and why does it matter? And that was the launching point, right, for the template of the book. And then when Ascension came on, their team, they saw something remarkable and they wanted to have their readers not only learn, but also to fall in love. And so then the historical content and the symbolism was added, and the early church quotes or the biblical quotes, or there's a few modern saint quotes about each item. So not only do readers, as they're going through the book, look at each individual item, but they learn what it is, but they also learn the history of that item. And they learn, why does it matter? Why is it in our church? And then my favorite part of each page is that quote at the end, because most of them are early church quotes, and I love the early church. And just to show that the ancient history of our faith and how apostolic it is, each and every one of these items that, most of them aren't new, and most of them are very ancient. So that is the inspiration and the layout of the book.
And one thing I would say about the book, so I actually have a digital version of it that I've received for review, but it's very beautifully produced, and a big part of it is the lovely photography of the different items that are in the book as well. Did you participate in that, or was that done through the publisher?
Yeah, so that was part of the Ascension team. Andrew, the project manager, he took that and oversaw that. The photographer, Christian, very talented young man. I could not have wanted better and more beautiful photos. These are absolutely stunning and really help you to enter into the sacredness of each item. I mean, as you read and you see that beautiful photo, it really immerses you into the church, and it makes you feel like you were right there with each item. So very beautifully done.
And there are three main sections to the book, so that they are the sacred and the mass, which are sort of the sacramentals and the items used in the mass, the sacred vestments, which that's kind of clear what that is, and then the sacred environment. So when I thought it would be fun to talk about one thing from each of those sections, and for the first one, I picked out the one that I gravitate to, which is the sacred bells. I am an author myself, and I wrote a series called The Chime Travelers. That's for a fiction series for children. And
I love the Chime Travelers.
Well, so
my children, we have all of them at home.
Yeah, so that's my books, and
that's
the Chime
amazing.
The Chime Travelers series is very much related to bells, and one of the things that I try to do with Chime Travelers, and this is not as explicit as it is in your books, but I tried to basically take the items that we would find in a Catholic church and kind of sneak them in. So I use the word narthex in the books, and and the action in the books relates to the ringing of bells that happens not only on the altar but in many different places around the church. But in your section on altar bells, you started off by asking, do you hear the bells? They ring a few times during Mass to let us know that something amazing is happening. I just love that. And you talk about the fact that for many years, the Eucharist was hidden because of the kind of fear factor of practicing the faith, but that eventually, the church began the practice of calling, people to prayer with the bells, and I just love that so much, and so. That was one of the ones that I was just so happy to see included in this. Which of the first section, which of the items that you described was the one that you most enjoyed learning or writing about?
I would say that it was either the nave or the credence table. Those two, I think, were the most fun and shocking for me, really, to find out the history of the nave, and then which is where all the pews are,
right?
And then also the symbolism of the credence table blew my mind. And I'd have to say, out of all the items in the book, the credence table is now my favorite because of why it's there and just that beauty that it uplifts in our liturgy. And so maybe you can tell anybody who may be like, so I was catechized in the 70s, which means that we, made a lot of banners and didn't really read the catechism very much. So for somebody maybe who doesn't know, what exactly is the credence table, and where is it situated in the church? Yeah, so the credence table is in the sanctuary, and the credence table is that one table that's by the altar, and it holds all those sacred vessels needed for the Mass, for the liturgy of the Eucharist. And we normally don't notice the credence table until the liturgy of the Word is completed. And it's just beautiful table that after the liturgy of the Word is complete, the items that are located on this table come forth, and it starts the liturgy of the Eucharist. So it's just it's a beautiful table that allows the transition of the two liturgies to happen. And it's just I go into a little bit more detail in the book, but it's a beautiful, beautiful table that no one ever sees, and is really the middle point that bridges the liturgy of the Word to the liturgy of the Eucharist. So
it probably bears underscoring at this point that, in case you haven't noticed, this is a book that's filled with kind of Catholic jargon, but it also, whether you're purchasing the book for a little child in your life, or maybe you're somebody who's been in church for many, many years, and you just, some of the things you just have been doing it for so long that you don't necessarily know, why does the priest, for example, dip his fingers into that bowl, so it's great to kind of look back and dig into some of this. So let's turn now to the second section of the book, which is the vestments. And I'm wondering why you chose to include this, and how it merits kind of a full section of the book.
Right. So we see Father up there, and if you ask a child who that is, most of the time the child will say Jesus or God and not Father, because when we're in Mass and we say Jesus is there and the child looks up, Jesus or Father is holding, Jesus' presence under appearance of bread. And so I really wanted the readers to understand that when Father is up there and he's in persona Christi at the Mass, at the altar, what he's wearing truly matters in that moment. That the priest is wearing each individual layer or item in his sacred vestments for a particular purpose. And not only is he wearing them in the Mass for a particular purpose, but other times when he's not celebrating Mass, my children and I see him in other vestments, and those are for very particular purposes. And I really wanted readers to understand that Father, when he is representing the church in the liturgy and the sacraments, he is really everything that he's doing is for a reason, including everything that he is wearing. And also so that my children and I can understand what the difference is between that deacon and that priest. Because, children, when they see, and adults sometimes when they see multiple people up there in the sanctuary, it's, which one, who's the main celebrant, who's the deacon. And so it really explains the roles of each person that's found in the sanctuary based on their vestments as well.
Well, and there are some really cool pictures in that section of the book that kind of let you know all those. And they actually include also, there are vestments that aren't necessarily visible to us. If the priest, comes out fully vested, we may not know, the particular portions of the vestment that are underneath and their symbolism as well. And they do each. And it's very cool if you ever have a chance to see Father vest before Mass, the care with which many of them will place on their vestments, because they're, in a posture of prayer as they vest and prepare to celebrate the Eucharist as well. It's so beautiful. So the third section of the book relates to the sacred environment. And as somebody who loves visiting any new church, I whenever I travel, the main thing that I try to do is see churches. And just this last week, my husband and I were visiting a beautiful, very old cathedral in a different part of the world. And one of the things that we noticed when we entered it was that this particular cathedral it was quite an old building. So it had very, very old, antiquated Stations of the Cross that lined the outside of the cathedral. And then on the inner section, more in the inner seating, there was a second set of Stations of the Cross. And it was quite interesting because those were very modern, done in very modern art. And my husband, who is a convert, like yourself, who would probably say I was nothing or sort of Lutheran before I became Catholic.
Yep.
We remarked on the two Stations of the Cross, two sets, and he said, "Wow, why do they have those new ones? Because the old ones are so much more wonderful. Like they shouldn't have even put up those new ones." And I thought it was really interesting because a lot of times we think, oh, well, we need to keep the church new and fresh or whatever. But it just kind of underscored for me the fact that something that's very antiquated has a stateliness and a grace to it that continues to draw our eyes heavenward, as they did for Greg in that moment. So talk a little bit about the sacred environment and what's included in that particular section of our churches.
Right. So everything outside of the Mass, I tried to include, as you're sitting in the pews, you look around you, you see sacred artwork, you see stained glass windows, you see votive candles, you see statues. There's also, usually a confessional area attached somewhere in the church, and there's usually an adoration chapel somewhere in the church. So it's everything that's still in the church, just not used directly in the Mass. And so I think my favorite one out of the whole chapter is the prayer candles, those votive candles, right? The photo. Every time I flip to this photo, Lisa, I instantly feel warmth and peace. And it's just, I don't know if it's the colors that are in the picture or if it's the prayers that are captured in this picture. You know, like these candles that are lit, those are people's prayers that they're asking God to answer. And so it's a beautiful page. And so that's the sacred environment, the holy oils, right? Those oils that you see, and the monstrance that's in the Adoration Chapel, and those stations of the cross that, you know, are either those full statues on those ledges, or maybe they're just a small print on the wall. But it's the environment that's in the church that's still used to point us to God and to heaven, but not used directly in the Mass.
Well, it's such you actually taught me a new word. I like I said, I'm always learning something new about the faith, and I had never heard the word ambry before. So that was a new one for me. The area where the sacred oils are actually housed, that little sort of like little box.
And the historical content for that one is fascinating. So I'll point that out. Historical content for all of it is fascinating, but ambry was really cool to dig into and find out more information about. So, and obviously all of the items in here, I'm bound by the length of the page, right? So what readers will get is just, you know, the overview of the historical content and the general definition of that item. And I'm hoping that as people read this, they will want to dig in more, right? They'll want to fall more in love and fall more in knowledge of the sacred that's in this book that's found in every Catholic church. So I'm hoping that will be that jumping off point for someone reading, going, you know, that's really interesting. I really want to know more about that. And then they will start their own journey.
Well, I think that for a lot of us, you know, we become at home in our parishes, and sometimes, you know, we kind of dull our senses to the things that are around us. So I would think that picking up a copy of this book would really kind of cause you to look with fresh eyes again at some of the things that maybe you've just thought, oh, well, that's just like the little coffee table that's sitting next to, you know, like maybe that this will. So I'm kind of curious what you would say to someone who maybe is not worshiping in a church that is physically beautiful to them. Maybe it's a church that's your local neighborhood church and you don't have a lot of choices, but it's not necessarily a soaring, beautiful cathedral. How can these glimpses of the sacred and these everyday objects, kind of even in a church that's more plain or less decorated, really draw our heart toward God?
Right. So is this a Catholic church that just might not be beautiful, or is this
I'm saying a Catholic church. I've been into lots of churches in lots of different places, and every church is beautiful because Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist, in the tabernacle.
Amen.
But sometimes they're constructed in an era that was less than inspired architecturally.
Yeah. So if people find themselves not being, you know, brought into the beauty of certain items, I really just want to let anyone know just to maybe lift up those items that they do find that are beautiful, and maybe those ones will help soften, you know, the ones that they might not find appealing, or if it's truly something that they don't like or they know should be improved, to really talk to the priest of that parish or the parish staff. And it may even be a story of why that was chosen that might help them to understand why it's there. Or maybe that's the jumping off point for that parish to really look into something more beautiful and more sacred, you know, in appeal at least, for their church. But, you know, like you said, Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. So, you know, in the hierarchy of what is important, that's obviously number one. No matter what your environment is, Father is up there. He allows Jesus to be made present under the appearance of bread and wine, and Jesus is truly present there, and that's the beauty of our faith, right? We could be in a basement, in a room with no windows, and Jesus is present in our Eucharist, and that's truly what matters. And the environment that is found in our churches is really meant to bring us more towards God, right? We're physical beings. We need the smells and the sight and the touch and that warmth that comes from these sacred items. But even if we didn't have them, Jesus is still with us, right? So really just try and take a look at what is beautiful. And if something is really bothering someone, find out more about it, because there might be a really good reason why it's there. And maybe if there's not a good reason, maybe that's a good time for the parish to come together and say, maybe something needs to change.
Oh, Andrea, you were saying exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. It's so interesting. I think it was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I was on a trip, and I traveled to lots of destinations that have pretty poor cultures, and I was in India for a few weeks, and I was with some wonderful families and some very kind of I'll say very economically challenged areas of India. And after I came home from that trip, I went coincidentally immediately to Orlando, Florida, and I had a great chance to worship at there's a shrine down there called a Shrine of Our Lady of the Universe, and it's a really beautiful church and very, very, very ornate. And I remember when I visited that, kind of coming on the heels of this trip to this really, really poor part of the world, that when I went into that church, and it's lavish in its beauty, really. And I remember talking with one of the priests and being almost upset because I was still having a little bit of emotions and probably jet lag too from my trip to India, just about the amount of kind of money that had been spent in the shrine. And the priest who I talked with this about, I think he could recognize my emotion, and he said, "You need to recognize that the things that are in this church were given to the church as gifts by families. That this is not that the church itself did not go out and get their Visa card and buy all these goodies for the church, but that these were given as gifts, and that they are meaningful to the people who donated them, and that's how this church is over time has become such a beautiful place for worship, and really a destination for people from all over the world. And that's kind of stayed with me, because now when I visit older churches too, it's often the fact that when you see particularly sacred art like stained glass windows or statues in churches, but often sometimes even pews, you'll find these little markers that indicate the names of people that have given those items as gifts. And I think the case is probably true that in many cases, those were families that, maybe sacrificed because they wanted to share a gift in that way with the church. So I think it's maybe something that's been a little lost in newer times. Those, the sharing of sacred art and, the decorating of our worship spaces, because this is really, our church is our home. It is our spiritual home. So I love that you mentioned that. And that you suggest that if we're missing that, a good chance to go and talk to our pastor. Maybe if we feel a lack of sacred art in our parish, might be a good chance to go volunteer to be the person who finds out about how to bring more of that. What is the church like that you worship in? I'm curious, Andrea.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful here. I am very lucky. St. Michael Catholic Church in St. Michael, Minnesota is, we have priests that come in and the bishop, and every time they say how amazing the worship space is and how beautiful it is. So we are very lucky here in this parish community to have amazing, beautiful, sacred items. So, I'm very lucky, although, it's the book is similar, obviously, to what my church worship items are. but they're both still very beautiful, right? So they're different. That's one of the main things that I say in the book is, once you read this, go into your own parish, go into your own church, find that item so that you can notice them in your own worship, in your own liturgies, in your church. That, this isn't meant to just be in your bag or at your home. I really hope that readers will take this into their heart and bring it into their own church. So that's at least my hope, is that readers will really help or really use this to wrap their heart around their own items and found in their own churches.
Absolutely. And hey, if you have anything to do with altar servers at your parish, you definitely need to get a copy or one copy for each altar server in the parish, I think would be absolutely really important. So you can just reach out to Ascension Press for that.
Definitely, your sacristans too. This would be a beautiful book because, they're right there in the sacred and immersed in it and setting up for Father. So this would be great, RCIA candidates, right? So the ones that are coming into the church and maybe they haven't asked themselves the why questions yet or the how questions, and maybe this will be a great jumping off resource for them to start wrapping their heart around it, because I went through RCA too, and sadly I didn't really take it seriously. And I wish that someone would have handed me this and spared me 4 years of just blindly walking through my faith. So,
well, Andrea,
great
you may not have thought
well.
you took it seriously, but definitely some seeds were planted that have blossomed into big, beautiful flowers. So, well, I wish we had more time. I know that we have to be moving along, but I want to thank you so much for the book, and just to say that the name of the book again is The Sacred That Surrounds Us. We'll have links in our show notes for this so that you can get a hold of it and all the information about that. And I'm positive that if you're lucky enough to have a Catholic bookstore near you, that this book is going to be on sale there. You can get it at Ascension Press or online as well. We'll have links for that too. Andrea, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners before we let you get back to your family?
I think, Lisa, just whether you use my resource, The Sacred That Surrounds Us, or a different resource, just really take the time in your spiritual life to fall in love with what we have as Catholics, because what we have is a gift from God. And so just to really cherish that gift and to find out about it so that way you can build up the children that are going to be asking these questions and being in this environment. So just take time in your own spiritual growth to fall in love.
Absolutely. So definitely check out the book. Andrea, thank you so much for your time and for, just your journey and for sharing that with us. What a gift to meet you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, listening audience. God bless you all.
And tell those little chime travelers at your house that I said hi to, and thanks for reading with me.
Oh, they are going to flip out when they hear that I was talking to the author.
Wow, what a joy. Well, hopefully we'll be able to have you on when you write your next book. So God bless, Andrea.
God bless you, Lisa.
Well, friends, that is it for this week's episode. I really want to recommend not only that you pick this up, but maybe that during this Lenten season, that you just, next time you enter your parish, just open your heart and, maybe look around yourself with fresh eyes at all of the intentional ways in which your church is meant to draw you closer. During this Lenten season, we're really, our goal with this season is to always be growing closer to Jesus Christ. And so what a great joy it would be to arrive, at our Easter vigil and at the celebration of the Eucharist on the resurrection, just with a more clear understanding of the beautiful sacred space around us. And if the sacred space is lacking, hey, maybe this is your week to go light a candle and buy some beautiful flowers and decorate your church in some special way. So that is it for this week's show. But I do want to remind you that we're always looking for your feedback. So if there's ever anything that you'd like to share with me, you can reach out by email to lisahendey@gmail.com or find me on social media at Lisa Hendey. Truly appreciate your star reviews and ratings over at iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. And I do want to thank my friends at Breadbox Media for letting me be a part of the Breadbox family. Until next week, friends, I hope you have an awesome week. I'll see you next time. God bless.
Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by Jack Kane Ford. Find your next Ford Tough vehicle at caneford.com.
CMF Curo is the country's first Catholic healthcare ministry to provide an affordable health sharing solution rooted in Catholic teaching and community. Learn more at mycatholichealthcare.com/podcast. That's mycatholichealthcare.com/podcast.